I just put too much guitar, so yeah.
Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video, and today I'm delighted to be joined once again by my friend Mark Follows. Hi Mark.
Hiya.
And yeah, hello. And Mark has been on the channel a few times now, and we've decided to butt heads once again, and this time talk about Pink Floyd, which was your idea, Mark. So I'm going to pass the book immediately to you. You can
Okay.
explain why you wanted to do this particular video and what the theme actually is.
Yeah, so last time we looked at the albums of Black Sabbath post Ozzy. So now
Mhm.
we're looking at the Pink Floyd albums post Roger Waters, which is 80s mainly, isn't it? Apart from the most recent one. Really look at them and sort of kind of see how they kind of stack up to the sort of more well-known stuff, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, not just 80. So if we just do the dates here, it goes
Actually, yes,
87,
90s. Yeah,
87, 94, and then 2014. So
that's
it
right. Yeah.
covers quite a broad time
Mm,
span. And I guess the period that we're talking about begins with A Momentary Lapse of Reason,
mm,
which came out on the 7th of September, 1987. Did you get that record when it first came out? Was that an album that you heard at the time, or was it something you
mm.
came to much later?
No, I think at the time, I think I had it on cassette. I possibly take that off someone else who might have had it, or got
Right.
it from the CD library, the record library in my local town, which is very well stocked. So a
Mhm.
lot of the stuff from the 80s I listened to was from there. I got hundreds of tapes still, all that stuff. So I definitely had it and I listened to it quite a lot. Yeah,
And
for sure.
did you know the classic Floyd at the time, or were you coming to it
Um,
fresh?
well, the first album I ever bought, it was actually like a couple of years earlier, actually, I think, 2, 3 years earlier, was Wish You Were Here. I
Mhm.
bought that on cassette from W.H. Smith's, which I've still got. So that was my first introduction to Pink Floyd, really. I don't know why I bought that. I don't know. I just had it in my head. May have I heard something somewhere. But apart from that, and obviously brick on the wall and a few money and a few bits here and there, they weren't really there, were they, at that point on the radio or anything? They weren't really sort of around, so you didn't really hear much. No, I didn't have any of the old records and nothing. No, so this is
Mm.
kind of my first foray, if you like, into Pink Floyd. Apart from, like I say, Wish You Were Here.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a very clear memory of it coming out because I saw them on the tour. I saw them on the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour. I think it was maybe June or July, 1987, and it was my first ever concert, and it just blew my mind.
Hmm.
I'd been a Floyd fan ever since Brick in the Wall Part Two, 1979, but I'd sort of become aware by, I don't know, 85 that they seemed to have disappeared off the landscape. Really, I stumbled across a cassette of the final cut on a street market while on holiday in Cornwall, and I thought, oh, what's this? It came after the wall, but I just had no idea of its existence, basically. And I quite like that album, but it's a very Roger Watersy record. And I'm
Mm.
gonna guess that you have heard Final Cut. I guess we should
Yeah,
briefly
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about it because it was the
yeah.
final
I mean,
one before Waters left, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It's not an easy album to listen to be honest. I don't really listen to it very often. If I, once or twice, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're not going to get sort of bogged down in the history because the
Mm.
history is very tangled, and I'm guessing most people who are watching this video will know what happened. There was a falling out. Waters left the band, and then he tried to stop the others from carrying on, and they didn't want to do that. And so they got together again. Well, David Gilmour and Nick Mason got together again. Rick Wright had been booted out of the band by Roger Waters a few years before, so they put him on a salary in order to get him back into the group. And they made this album called A Momentary Lapse of Reason, which was recorded largely on David Gilmour's houseboat, the Astoria. A totally idyllic scene. If you just imagine this sort of, multimillionaire guitarist on this houseboat on the River Thames. And I think what happened was he was inviting lots of people down to play with him. And I think my understanding of the situation was maybe it was going to be a solo album, but then he realised that he would sell a lot more if it was Pink Floyd kind of thing. But there was still quite a big cast of characters on the album. You
Mm.
had two different drummers as well as Nick Mason. You had Carmine Appice and Jim Keltner on drums. And Gilmour, he was writing with other people as well because, Roger Waters had been the the linchpin, hadn't he, in terms of writing the lyrics, and I suppose he was the grand conceptualizer, wasn't he? And I think there was a problem that Gilmour had, and that he didn't really have a concept for the album. He didn't have a kind of lyrical angle to come at it at. Waters had
Mm,
always had that, hadn't he? I mean, you mentioned before about trying to compare some of this stuff with the earlier Floyd, and
mm,
I'll just quickly run this quote past you now, and you can tell me what you think. This just comes from an issue of Uncut magazine. So the quote goes: Waters, Mason, and Wright would together achieve commercial success with a momentary lapse of reason and the chart topping The Division Bell. But neither album could hope to recapture the magic and enduring mass appeal that the three had created with Roger Waters, the John Lennon of the group. What do you make
John
of that?
Lennon.
So Roger Waters was the
Yeah.
John Lennon. So essentially, what you've got with Momentary Lapse onwards, you've got sort of Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo trying to be the
Yeah.
Beatles. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? What do you make of that? Is that fair? Is that a
Uh,
distortion
um,
of the truth? What?
I, d- I don't think it's ever helpful to compare anything to the Beatles, to be honest.
Okay.
You get into all sorts of weird stuff. I don't think the dynamic is the same or anything, to be honest. I think, to be honest, that's probably more unfair on Paul McCartney than it is on
Yeah, because
David Gilmour, to be honest.
Paul McCartney was totally prolific, wasn't he, in a way that
Yeah,
David
yeah,
Gilmour wasn't. In fact, one of the accusations that Waters threw against Gilmour was that he hadn't been very prolific. And Rick Wright come to that. He said,
yeah.
these guys were not they were not writing all the time. They were, I think Waters saw them as being quite sort of passive and not really very
Mm,
creative people. And he wanted to go off and do his thing, and he started to sort of, he went off and started making these really bizarre solo albums. He did Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking and
mm,
Radio Chaos, and I think in his mind he thought the public were sort of going to go with him and
mm,
realize that, oh yeah, this is the kind of, the creative firebrand of Pink Floyd. Let's all go and see him. Whereas in fact, it was the Pink Floyd brand name at the end of the day that was going to
mm,
win out. So even though Gilmour had all these people working with him, it was largely a solo album, I think, and it was produced by
mm,
Bob Ezrin. I'm talking about Momentary Lapse now,
mhm,
but and of course, Bob had done The Wall, so
mm,
he was somebody who'd had a big major involvement with the Floyd. And they didn't manage to dream up a concept, but the album, I suppose, does have a few themes running through it. So let's just quickly talk about it then. A Momentary Lapse of Reason, 7th of September 1987, got to number 3 in the UK and in the US, so it didn't top the charts in either territory, but I think the album was quite successful, really, in the scheme of things. It was definitely not a kind of flop attempt to get the Pink Floyd thing back up and running. I think it did create a massive splash, I seem
mm,
to remember.
mhm.
So take it away. What do you reckon then? Moment you lapse of reason.
Well,
It's an interesting listen all these years later, I think.
yeah, I've got. I mean, my summary is all the ingredients of Pink Floyd minus the substance. It's got
Okay, well, yeah.
very 80s sounding, big production, a bit like Tears for Fears at the time, and there's obviously
So
lots of David Gilmour, really.
does that not justify that exact quote then? Because you're lacking the John Lennon. You're
Yeah.
lacking you're lacking the person who had the sort of anger and
Mm,
the cynical edge
yeah.
which Waters brought to the group. The lyrics on this album, they're pretty wishy-washy, aren't they?
Mm.
Is that
Yeah,
what you were
yeah.
talking about, or were you mainly talking about the
Yeah, no,
music?
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's like it's got all the sounds and all the sort of beats that you expect from Pink Floyd, but it just doesn't have that edge at all, does it?
No, I guess not. No. The thing is with Floyd, though, it's like which Pink Floyd were they trying to
Well,
reconstruct? Because Pink Floyd
yes.
had already gone through all these different kind of versions
Mm,
of themselves. I do think it's interesting the way that they use very specific sounds and very specific little, guitar motifs, keyboard motifs. Almost to sort of you think, well, I can see why Roger Waters called it. I think he called it a pretty fair forgery because there was this kind of sense that let's just take a little bit of that, which
mm,
people recognize from Dark Side of the Moon, maybe a chord
mm,
change, or maybe a little bit of
yes.
keyboard comes in, or a little bit of a guitar. I mean,
Mm,
the opening track, Signs of Life, I suppose it tries to recreate Crazy Diamond, doesn't it? It's that it
yes, it
starts.
is.
I mean, it
Yeah,
starts with water. It starts with somebody punting
yeah,
down the river, but then you get that keyboard wash coming in,
yeah.
and then Gilmour's guitar comes in playing a high
Mm,
note, and you're thinking, "Hang on a minute,
Yeah.
This
I've
sounds
got
suspiciously like 1975 Floyd, doesn't it?
Wendy Carlos, Wish You Were Here was
Wendy Carlos.
yeah. Um, like the soundtracks to Clockwork Orange and
Okay.
yeah, The Shining. It's got that element to it. And like I say, Wish You Were Here. It's kind of
Yeah.
starts, very similar, isn't it? I think.
It does, but then it goes into this song "Learning to Fly," which
Mm.
had been written by Gilmour and a couple of guys, John Carrion and Anthony Moore, and it was inspired by the fact that Gilmour was having flying lessons at the time.
Hmm.
That's kind of where that song came from. And as soon as that comes in, it sort of shatters the spell because the opening
Mm.
track, you think, oh yeah, this is going to be a sort of floaty Pink Floyd 75 kind of experience. But then it comes in with all these really kind of massive 80s, I don't know, gated snare drums and
Yes.
clearly a lot of digital keyboards going on. I mean,
Mm.
you're the keyboard person, you're the expert with all this kind of thing. What do you make of it? Because I don't think Rick Wright played on much of the album, or I think he played on some of it, but they had to kind of take him out of the mix because of legal
Mm.
reasons. And we'll
Right.
talk about that later because there was a later remix of it, but they
Yes.
put his stuff back in. But
Put back in.
there was a big long list of keyboard players, I think, on this album, and a huge amount of programming and
Mm.
digital stuff going on, none of which had ever happened on Floyd records before.
Mm.
I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, it's
Yeah,
that
I mean
analog digital
that's
thing, isn't it?
yeah, that's the 80s. I mean 80, 87. I guess sort of 86, 85, 86 when they were recording it. That was kind of the sort of the midpoint between analog to digital. So
Okay.
this is when you start getting stuff like DX7 and
Mhm.
keyboards like that. They're
Yeah.
kind of quite um, all the bells and the sort of the whooshes and that kind of stuff, all the sort of ethereal sounds and those sort of. To be fair, they don't. A lot. You've listened to a lot of stuff at that period. You've got those horrible sort of electronic keyboard sounds,
Mm.
which I hate, and that sort of the keyboard bell sound. They don't go that far, thankfully. But yeah,
No, good point.
yeah, like I say, it's definitely got that sort of like yeah, that sort of production that you expect to hear at that sort of period of time for sure.
Yeah, and I think to be fair on Gilmour, he was probably thinking, well, it's not 1975 anymore.
Mm.
We do need to compete.
Hmm.
I think on the live arena, I think it's interesting to note that Gilmour, before he did the tour, he went and saw all the big shows that were around at the time. So I think he went to check out. I think he checked out, Madonna, Michael Jackson, Prince, everybody who was doing, big stadium shows. So he was clearly, I think at the time he was definitely interested in looking around and seeing how things had moved on
Mm.
and trying to do something very modern. I quite like the song.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
good. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's got a good chorus, wouldn't you say? A nice commercial
Hmm.
kind of
Yeah, yeah,
hook.
yeah, yeah. I put good contemporary Pink Floyd.
Yeah, definitely. And I
Yeah.
like the way that it's got all the sort of all the female backing vocals behind it. That was
Mm.
one big element that they brought into the
Hmm.
mix.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, very worthy song. Now the next song, just to say, we're not going to go through every single track because we'll be here all
Mm.
day. But
Mm.
Dogs of War, the second track, this is a track
Yeah.
which got a lot of flack at the time from the Pink
Mm.
Floyd fan community. Everybody hated it, I guess, because the words are so sort of banal, really. If you compare it to some of the
Mm.
stuff Waters was doing,
Hmm.
it's very sort of generic 80s protest song, isn't it? But
Mm.
production wise, again, it's quite good. All those sorts of cellos, that
Mm.
quite
It
sort of
sounds like he's
meaty.
trying to be. Yeah, it sounds like he's trying to be Roger Waters on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's got that big sort of screaming sax solo in it as well, which was
Mm.
played by a young guy called Scott Page, who had literally the worst 80s mullet of anybody. I challenge you to find anybody who had a worse mullet than him, because he was in the live show. I think it's a track that was trying to connect back to things like, Money had a sax
Mm.
solo on it and it had a
Yeah.
thing where it sort of gets into a heavy section in the middle. All these little kind of things, flagging up old Floyd. And then
Mm.
One Slip, which was a co-write with Phil Manzanera from Roxy Music. I always loved this track. I love all the sort of little sort of, I don't know, like vibraphones or
Mm.
sort of ethnic percussion at the beginning of it. And then
Yeah.
it starts to morph into more like sort of digital sounding, like
Yeah.
bleeps. And I think it's quite clever.
Yeah. I put very 80s on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that although like I say, all those synths you're talking about, the sort of digital synths and stuff is in there, isn't there? I think got that
Yeah.
sort of shiny 80s sound to it.
definitely. Shiny, bells and whistles. But again,
Mm,
quite a commercial song, quite catchy. And then on the turning away at the end of the side, this is the big kind of Live Aid moment. This
mm,
is one of the most dated things on the album, I think. It's a
mm.
nice song, but it couldn't be more sort of Zippos Aloft, really, could it? It's
No.
very that kind of swaying, on the turning
I
away,
know.
but like really sort of
Yes.
painfully slow drumming, big stadium kind of anthem.
Mm.
Bit, a
I
bit,
put a bit Mike and the Mechanics I put on my list.
Yeah, definitely Mike and the Mechanics. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I suppose that, I mean, that's the thing that you sort of, that's the accusation against this album is that Floyd were never generic, whether they were never,
No.
they, they never tried to ape anybody or copy anybody. They were always leaders in their field. On this album,
Mm,
you can basically hear Gilmour trying to follow the crowd.
mm,
Side two's got some okay stuff on it. I quite like the first track and the last track. I think they're both decent. You've got Yet Another
mm.
Movie at the beginning, which is a slow, quite dour kind of song. Do you like
What,
this one?
yet another guitar solo on that one.
Yeah. As we get to the next album, we can talk a little bit about Gilmour's guitar because I don't find it
Yeah.
too bad on this record.
Mm,
He starts a bit later on, he starts doing a lot of what I call seagull guitar solos, where it's all
yeah.
everything's played like high up on the neck and
Quite,
he's
yeah.
squeezing the strings all the time and playing a lot of slide guitar. And it
Mm,
sounds like sort of keening seagulls all the time. It's like a bit like Bergerac, the Bergerac theme tune. He goes into Bergerac territory, but I don't think it's too bad on this album. And I must say, I do really like the instrumental track on side two, which is Terminal Frost.
mm.
Very 80s though. What have you got for that one?
Yeah, I think sarcastically I put finally a chance for Dave Gilmour to show off his guitar skills. I got Tears for Fears, Peter Gabriel, David Byrne kind of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Yeah, good. Yeah. And then Sorrow
I,
at the end, he recorded the guitar for that at the LA Memorial Sports Arena through a massive PA, and it does
mm,
have the most enormous guitar sound, really
mm,
huge. And as a song, it's a bit monotonous, but I do think it's quite heavy. It's quite gut churning some of the guitar stuff he does on there,
mm,
and I think it's a bit anonymous though, isn't it? I mean, it's not comfortably
mm.
numb, is it?
No, I said very familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, good. But yeah, it's not gonna. It's kind of a lot of these songs are kind of hard to remember when you've listened to them. Unless you go back and listen to them again, sometimes you kind of forget what they are.
yeah.
They don't really have like a structure to them.
Mm.
When you think about all the tracks on Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here as well. Every track you kind of know in your head how it goes, don't you, from start to finish.
Yeah,
Whereas a lot of these ones, you don't really get that.
no. And again, it might be because they've lost Roger Waters. I think he was the guy that was able to give their stuff a bit of individuality. I think the problem is with David Gilmour is that he is a guitar stylist. He plays the guitar in a very particular way. And
Mm,
it's his fallback position, isn't it? It's like, okay, we've got 8 bars here. I'll just do some David Gilmour guitar.
mm,
Whereas I
yeah,
think with Roger in the band, you'd have more of a dynamic of Roger maybe saying, "Well, Dave, maybe you shouldn't do some screaming guitar in this bit. Maybe we should get like a synth or
mm,
like a modulator or something, like on the Run
mm,
on Dark Side of the Moon, where they just took all the
yeah,
instruments out and just put this incredible sort of analog synth in there doing all the
mm,
all the stuff. That's what this album I think is lacking. It's lacking that really kind of Floydian ahead of the curve kind of sound.
mm.
It is sort of it's constantly making you think of other things, isn't it?
Mm.
Do you have
I
anything
do
to add
like
to that?
those. Yeah, just those two, A New Machine parts one and two, which I like. Those short interludes.
Yeah.
Remind me a little bit of Underworld, sort of the vocal with
Okay.
the vocal effects they put on it, like the resonator and the
Hmm.
vocoder.
I've always been here.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. There's a few sort of Underworld tracks like that where it's just like the vocal and the voice and the sort of the effects. So
Mm.
that's interesting. So yeah,
Yeah, good
maybe
point actually.
maybe it was seeing to the future a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe perhaps those two little bits of songs, maybe those two are actually perhaps the most interesting thing on the album in a way.
Mm,
And in a way, if we get to the next album, which came out a few years later, they don't really do any of that. So
mm,
I mean, just sort of just to cut a long story short, so they do this album, and then they do this massive tour. Like I said, I saw them on
Mm,
that tour, and it was mind
yeah.
blowing. It was. I mean, the thing is,
Mm,
they brought out all the stuff that they'd done previously. There was the floating pink pig with the laser eyes. There was
mm,
all the Gerald Scarf animations. There was
mm,
explosions, hospital beds crashing into the stage. I mean, it was totally mind blowing.
mm,
But then they brought out the live album, which was
mm,
called Delicate Sound of Thunder.
yeah.
And I would say, of all the albums, all the records in my collection, that one was the single most disappointing record I think I ever heard. I got it for
Really.
Christmas in '87, and I was so excited and thrilled to get it because the
Mm,
show had been so just unbelievable. And I played it, and I was like, oh God, it sounds really sort of lumpen and not very inspiring. A dreadful version
mm.
of Comfortably Numb, like really slow, dirgy. I don't know. I didn't connect to it at all.
Okay.
What's
I listened to it a lot. Actually. I really liked that
okay?
album. I think because not having heard the previous stuff, apart from one or two things, like one couple of albums and a few singles,
Hmm,
that was kind of like a greatest hits in sort of a live version of that. So I didn't see the show or anything. I listened to it a lot. Actually, I enjoyed it, and that kind of turned me into the sort of going back and listening to
hmm,
some of the older stuff as well. So it's kind of like it's almost like a starting point in the album
hmm.
for me. So yeah, I'm quite fond of it. Yeah, listened to it in preparation for this. It's not very good. It's not aged very well at all. It's a
No,
bit very
no.
flat, isn't it? Really.
Well, I suspect that if I hadn't have seen the show, maybe I would have been more excited. I think there was just no way it could live up. That was the problem with it. And
No.
so yeah, it's not one that I ever go back to. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there were so many people on stage with them for that show. And they had two drummers. So they had Nick Mason, but then they had this guy behind him in this massive sort of it was like a cage of percussion, and he was standing up to play, and it was all on all sides of him, so he could turn
Mm.
around and hit things, and it was like, bloody hell, do you really need all that? I mean, this is, it's Pink Floyd. It's not some sort of Nigerian ensemble. I mean, it's
Mm.
basically 4/4 drum beat to the couple of fills here and there. I mean, why do you need all this percussion? And the saxophone player, the bass player who they brought in to replace Roger on bass was Guy Pratt, who's going to be on the next album that we're talking about. They had
Mm.
Tim Renwick on the guitar. They had three girl singers. So it was a big show, and there was a sense of like, is this Pink Floyd, or is this sort of some members of Pink Floyd and this vast ensemble that they've had to get together in order to duplicate the Floyd sound? I don't know.
Is that the first time they've been on tour for a long time then?
It was the first live shows they'd done since The Wall, which had been, I
Yeah.
think, in 1980. Yeah, and that had not been a
Mm.
big tour. They only did a
No.
few dates on that, a few arena shows here and there. So it was the first proper big stadium world tour they'd done since the Animals tour,
Mm.
which I think was 1978.
Mm.
So you're talking like 10 years, really.
Yeah.
And when I saw them, it did seem like they were already this totally legendary band from yesteryear. It's quite funny. I
Mm.
look back now and I think, God, they were only in their sort of mid to late 40s probably when I saw them.
Yeah.
But they seemed like total just dinosaurs, absolute
Mm.
dinosaurs. Um, so yeah, that was 87. And then they don't reconvene then for another, what is it, 3, 4, 7 years to do another studio album. And that's The Division Bell. Now, this one came out, Mark, when you and I were sharing a house, I think. I think we were
Yeah, we
sharing a
were. Yeah.
house.
Yeah. Just
94? Just
yeah.
about. Just
Mm.
about. But so in our Leeds days. And did you
Mm.
get this one when it first dropped?
No, I was. Yeah, this is mid-90s, so not interested at all. I'd moved on pretty swiftly.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, all the dance and all that.
all the dance and all that. Yeah, I mean, I
Mm.
was into all that as well, but I mean, I was such a dyed in the wool Floyd fan. There was no way I was not going to buy it. And yeah, this is The Division Bell, 28th of March, 94. And unlike The Momentary Lapse of Reason, this got to number one in the US, got to number one in the UK.
Okay,
Massive
that's
album.
surprising, really, considering the sort of the music industry at the
Mm.
time. Yeah.
Well, Gilmore was featured in, I think it was the NME, or maybe it was the Melody Maker, talking to Alex Patterson from the Orb.
Right. Okay.
I
Oh
think,
God. Right. Yeah. Is this the Orb time as well?
yeah,
Right. Okay. That makes more sense then, doesn't it? Because it's obviously that
Yeah.
this is when they were starting to come back, I guess. Is a
Mm.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because Floyd definitely, it was widely perceived, I think, that they had been a massive influence on stuff like
Mm.
the Orb, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
as you say, Underworld, all that digital
The whole
stuff that came.
ambience stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I think that's one of the reasons why it was the right place at the right time. Now, this
Mm.
album was also recorded, at least partly, on Gilmour's houseboat and at the Floyd's own studio, Britannia Row, but it was quite a different beast because it was mainly just the three of them. They got Rick Wright back on board again properly, and he pitches in with his classic old Floyd keyboards, which you didn't get quite so much of on Momentary Lapse. But on this album, you can hear his Farfisa organ, you know, is
Yeah.
there.
Hmm.
Certain keyboards which he used on the classic albums. Only Nick Mason, I think, on drums. You had Dick Parry on sax this time. He was the guy that played on Dark Side and on Wish You Were Here. So there's a sort of through line, a more clear through line, I think, back to classic Floyd with this one. Guy
Mm.
Pratt on bass again, and I suppose the big thing to say about this one is that is that Gilmour's wife, Polly Sampson, edges into the frame,
Mm.
much to Roger Waters' eternal disgust.
Mm.
She
A
comes
woman.
into a woman. She comes in to write the lyrics, no
Yeah.
less. So okay, what do you make of that then? So Pink Floyd with lyrics by Polly Sampson, the wife of David Gilmour.
Yeah. To be honest, it's fine.
Mhm.
Um, bands evolve, things move on. There's almost a similarity here with Peter Hook from New Order, ex New
Mm.
Order, who is also a bassist. I don't know if it's a bassist thing, but he has a similar gripe with New Order now because he's not in it. He doesn't think New Order should be New Order. It's not doesn't it's not it's a different band.
Mhm.
Um, so so he's gone off and he's doing the Joy Division stuff. Peter Hook and the Light, and he's doing these terrible soul versions of Joy Division tracks.
Oh
At the
dear.
same time, sort of Roger Waters revisiting. He's done the Wall tour and he's done like that Dark Side of the Moon album.
Mm.
Whereas, like I say, New Order have just sort of moved on and started doing
Mm.
their own thing. And the same with Pink Floyd, I guess, at this time as well, where they've moved on and maybe Roger Waters hasn't. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Definitely. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I'm not sure. In fact, Waters by this point had done, I think he'd done three solo albums by this point. The third one, Amused to Death, is okay. I mean, some Floyd fans really love it because you've still got on that album, you've still got a very clear lyrical angle, I suppose. You know, he definitely
Mm.
had. I, I think the problem with Polly Sampson's lyrics is that they are a bit kind of generic again. Um,
Mm.
uh, but they're not terrible. I mean, they're not, you know, they're
No.
not kind of like excruciatingly bad, which Waters claimed that they were. Um, Now, musically, I suppose this album, like I said before, it's more Floydian. It's quite funny how it starts again with another floaty ambient
Yeah.
piece, doesn't it? Which
It
again
does.
goes into a sort of heavy guitar thing. So Gilmour was really not afraid, I don't think, of repeating the formula when it worked.
No. No. Yeah. What do you want from me? I put bit like Eclipse, bit like The Wall. So you can sort of see
Yeah.
those sort of callbacks to the heyday really. And like Poles Apart, I put Hey You question mark. I think this one's much more kind of more like
Yeah.
recognizably, even though it's very different from the Pink Floyd of past, it's more recognizably Pink Floyd from the past.
I'll go with that for Pearls Apart, I think. Definitely Hey You. What
Yeah.
Do You Want From Me? I think is Dire Straits. I think it
Mm.
sounds really Mark Knopfler-y. It's got that kind of gruff, sort of bluesy, you know.
Mm.
Um, Pearls Apart, I think, probably is my favourite song on the album.
Mm.
It's a song which famously references, it's meant to reference Sid Barrett, isn't it? It's got that line, did you know it was all going to go so wrong for you? And did you know it was all going to go so right for me? There's a real sort of air of melancholy about it.
Mm.
It's got that really great sort of instrumental breakdown in the middle, which is, I don't know, it's just very, very Floydy. I think it's quite strong. I think it's quite a
Mhm.
strong opening to this album, but
Mm.
it then, I mean, for me, it flops a little bit. Then it goes into this
Mm.
Bergerac. It's called Marooned, which
Yeah.
literally could have come from, just for the benefit of our American viewers who might not know what Bergerac is. It was a TV detective series in the 1980s about a detective in Jersey who was a guitar player actually, but there's loads of scenes of him in this open top car driving sort of, you know, cliff tops and whatever, and there's always this kind of like Mark Knopfler-y sort of guitar. That's what this track is, isn't it? It's just, oh god,
Mm.
it's just Bergerac.
I just put too much guitar, so yeah.
Too much guitar, yeah. And
Okay,
then
I mean, if you like Dave Gilmour's guitar, I mean, I don't dislike Dave Gilmour's guitar. I think he's obviously like a great guitarist, but
yeah,
if you like him, you'd love these albums, wouldn't you? You really would.
fair comment, fair comment. Yeah. Have you ever heard his first solo album?
I've not actually, no.
It's
No.
worth hearing that because that album is like a different version of David Gilmour. That's him trying to just be David Gilmour.
Mm.
I think the problem with this album that we're talking about now and the previous Floyd one, it's like he's trying to be David Gilmour of Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
So on his first solo record, which is just called David Gilmour, which I think it came out in 1977 or something like that. There are, clearly there is guitar on it, but you don't get that kind of incessant,
Mm.
like another long guitar solo. I think it's something that
Yeah.
he decided, well, we need to keep linking back to Comfortably Numb, which
Mm.
had a famously long guitar solo on it.
Yeah.
And this record really starts to sag, I think, in the middle because there's
Mm.
just far too many guitar solos. I mean, um, and what's interesting is that there's not that many songs on the album. When I came to write them down in a list, I was like,
No.
God, is that it? Because the album,
Yeah.
it's about an hour.
Well, yeah, it's got 66 minutes long, which
Right.
is way too long.
It is.
And this obviously as well, this is kind of CD territory, isn't it? And the
Yeah.
last album was 50 minutes or something. So
Right.
you're starting to see that shift from vinyl to CD.
Yeah.
So vinyl albums about 40 minutes, 20 minutes each side, whereas you
Yeah.
get to CDs, you can fit up to like 70 minutes.
Hmm.
So this is when albums start to get really long, and from the public perception as well, because CDs were quite pricey,
Yeah.
certainly in the sort of late 80s, not so much in the mid 90s. So you're paying more, so you want more music, don't you? You want albums to be longer to get more for your buck, as it were. So I guess
Yeah.
these
But
albums are getting longer and longer, and from a record label's point of view, yeah, 66 minutes, great.
yeah.
That's almost a whole CD.
But it seems to lose its shape, though, doesn't it?
Oh God, yeah,
It
yeah,
slumps
yeah.
in the middle. You have this song called "Wearing the Inside Out," which is a Rick Wright track, which is him. I think it's him singing about himself,
Mm,
about the fact that he'd lapsed into this sort of inactivity and, probably mental ill health, in the
mm,
80s. But now he's coming back. He's sort of, coming back to life. But
mhm,
it's so painfully slow and it goes on
mm.
for about 6 minutes.
Yeah,
And it
guitar
has
noodling.
loads of guitar noodling.
Yeah.
Take It Back is okay. That's more upbeat. It's got a bit more of a kind of, but it's very stadium rock though, a bit
I've
sort of
got
generic.
I've got Big Country slash Bruce Hornsby.
I thought you were going to say Bruce Springsteen. It's like, oh God,
No,
Bruce
not quite
Hornsby.
that. No, not quite.
Yeah, yeah. And then, don't know. Actually, well, Keep Talking, I quite like. That's the one where they used
Mm.
a clip from Stephen
Stephen Hawkins.
Hawking
Yeah,
off the BT advert. That
yeah.
track actually is probably the most sort of classic Floydy kind of thing. It's got a bit of
Mm.
electronic. There's some electronics going on in that song, I think.
Hmm. Yeah,
Vocoders and whatever vocal samples. Do you like that one?
yeah, it's good. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking of a subgenre of Stephen Hawking because he's done quite a few. There's quite a few records with Stephen Hawkins on. So
There's a
as
video
a guitar
waiting to
player,
happen.
randomly, yeah.
The album closes with High Hopes, which
Mhm.
is a very, very textbook Floydian moment, isn't
Mm,
it? It starts with the church bells tolling in the distance, which
mm,
evokes what's the track on Dark Side of the Moon? The tolling of the iron bell calls the faithful
mm,
to their knees. It's got that very sort of English pastoral
mhm,
kind of thing going on, and quite a majestic, melodic Dave Gilmour melody, I suppose, and then just
mm.
this very long slide guitar solo at the end, which just
Endless guitar solos,
fades
yeah.
off into the distance. I do quite like it though. I think it's
Yeah.
a bit of a Floyd classic. This one really.
Mm. yeah, it's quite downbeat.
It
I
is.
think. Yeah, I thought a bit ploddy.
Mm.
Yeah, 8.5 minutes. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say 8.5 out of 10.
No, 8.5 minutes. It's no day in the life, is it?
No. So what? Are you not keen on it then? Is this not
Yeah,
a
I mean it's
song?
fine. Yeah, like I say,
Yeah.
you know. It's,
I think it brings the album to a nice conclusion. And if they
mm,
had decided not to do another album, and in a way, this is the last Pink Floyd album because the next one
mm,
we're going to talk about was done
yeah.
after Rick Wright's death. So this is the one really that closes out their career in terms of it being a group. I think
Mm,
it's quite a good send off. I think as a song, it seems to sum up the melancholy and the
mm,
very English Floydian kind of
hmm
pastoral Cambridge kind of thing. So I think it's quite a good album closer.
mm.
Were there any songs that we've skipped over that you wanted to mention? Because I think there's a
Just
few.
just the track before that, Lost for Words,
Oh yeah.
uh, which seems to be a pretty clear dig at Roger Waters.
Hmm.
I don't know whether that comes from because the lyrics are by Polly, aren't they? I don't know whether that comes from her or whether that comes from David through her. I don't know.
Well, I think Gilmore always denied it. He always said it was nothing to do with that, but you can make up your own mind. I mean, these things can
Yeah,
be, can be subconscious. He says something about I try and make amends or I try and apologize or something, and then they tell me to go fuck myself. Uh,
yeah,
is the lyric, isn't it?
yeah.
We should just
He
say, I
also,
mean, during this period, Gilmore and Waters were having nothing to do with each other really, and
mm,
the friendship or the partnership, obviously, it's
mm,
completely broken down by now. And
mhm,
some people even say that Poles Apart maybe has some lyrical references to Roger in it.
mm,
But I think all the lawsuits had finished by then. We didn't mention actually during the Momentary Lapse tour and that album, it was just totally beset all the time by lawsuits. Roger Waters was suing them. Every time they got to a new city to play, the first thing they had to do was sort out the legalities of it because Waters would sue them each time they advertised their
sure.
tickets. So uh, it was a bit of a mess, really. But I think by this point, '94, I think Waters had
Mm,
realised that the game was up as far as
mm,
they had got the Pink Floyd name for better or for worse. So,
mm.
of the two albums, Momentary Lapse of Reason, The Division Bell, for you, which one is the better album? Which one do you think is the most successful Floydian reboot?
I'll go for Momentary Lapse of Reason, I think.
Hmm.
Um, just because there's more in it that I enjoy
Hmm.
in Division Bell. So yeah, I'll go for that one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. I did a Floyd ranking video many years ago and I put the Division Bell in last place and Momentary
Mm.
Lapse second to last place. But I should just say that my opinion of A Momentary Lapse of Reason has gone up in recent years,
Okay.
largely as a result of picking up the remix, which came out, I think, in
Mm.
maybe 2019. But we'll get to that at the end because the
Mm.
next one in sequence is 2014, which was The Endless
Mm.
River. Now, this one is basically outtakes from the Division Bell.
Yeah.
It was put together after Rick Wright's death. I think he died in 2014, maybe.
Hmm.
So a lot of the tracks which they'd recorded didn't get used. So they put together this instrumental album of stuff which hadn't been used. And the two albums, they're sort of, I think this one is sort of a companion piece, isn't it? You've got a Stephen Hawking's
Mm.
track again. And you've got this
Yeah.
theme of lack of communication, I think, which I think defined Division Bell on this album. Even though I think there's just one song that has lyrics, the song titles, or
Mm.
I don't know, just the mood of the album. It seems to be a
Yeah.
continuance of that theme of non-communication and
Mm.
whatever. Now I must admit, I totally ignored this album when it came
Mm.
out.
God. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I read about what it was and I just thought, no, I don't fancy that. And I just totally ignored it. And it was only you suggesting that we make this video that finally
Mm.
made me listen to it. And
Mm.
I've heard it a few times now and I don't think it's too bad.
No, I quite enjoyed it. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Like I said, I only listened to it for this video, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Mm.
Um, Mainly because, yeah, I think weirdly enough, the lack of lyrics really helps.
Yeah.
And a lot of the tracks are pretty short, which also helps.
Yeah.
Even though it's like a sort of a one thing, the stages of that are pretty. There's not enough for. There's one or two sort of guitar solos, um, but generally speaking, it's much more compact.
Yeah, the first time you see the track list, you think, "Oh my God, how many songs?" I mean, I've not seen the vinyl version of it, but I'm guessing it's a double album.
Yeah,
It,
it's what's it, 53 minutes, so
is that all it is? 53 minutes. It's
yeah,
short. It's
yeah,
shorter than the Division Bell.
yeah.
Then that's amazing.
Mm, mm,
Um, there's a lot of Rick Wright on this album, and that's
mm,
probably why they made it essentially because he had
mm,
died. And I think there was this sense. I'll tell you what I think. There'd always been this dynamic in the original Floyd, this hostility between Waters on one side and Gilmour and
mm,
Richard Wright on the other side. But I think that the main hostility was between Waters and Gilmour because of their personalities. But I think there was a big artistic clash between Waters and Rick Wright. And
mhm,
Rick Wright once said something that really, really annoyed Roger Waters. He said something like, "Oh, we're not really that bothered about the lyrics. It's, for us, it's the music." And
mm.
Waters was really angry because he said that, for him, it was the lyrics came first, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it was a struggle then to try and sort of work with the other guys in Floyd to
Mm,
create a musical vehicle for his words. That was the thing. But Rick Wright always said that his favorite Floyd album was "Wish You Were Here" because that's the one that's
mm,
got all the big long Rick Wright passages. I think Rick
mm.
Wright was really into the sound of his sound. I think he loved to
Yes.
have like keyboards,
Mm,
endless keyboard overtures. And this album, essentially, I think it's almost Rick Wright or
mm,
Floyd finally sticking one up to Roger and going, "Ha, we've got the Pink Floyd name now, and guess what? We're going to do an album with like hardly any lyrics on it, which is mainly just Rick Wright playing all this
mm,
beautiful sounding keyboard stuff, which
mhm.
Roger would never have given it time of day. It would have just
No,
been bits.
no.
I don't know what you think of that theory. I dreamt it up this
Yeah.
morning listening to the
the-
album.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. I don't think they put it together with that in mind. But yeah, it's more of a tribute to Rick Wright, isn't it, than anything?
Yeah, maybe I'm being too cynical. Actually, maybe I
Yeah.
am being.
Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, because
Well, I think
there's
yes, it's
yeah.
definitely the least Pink Floydy of all the Pink Floyd stuff.
Yeah, although
In it.
I do think again there are moments where you listen to it and go, "Ooh, there's one
Mm,
song that has the guitar. You know the guitar from Brick in the Wall Part One
yeah.
on the wall. It's that sort of dang
Yeah.
ding dang ding dang ding dang ding dang ding dang. You
Yeah.
think, bloody hell, that really does sound like Pink Floyd, like the
Mm,
Wall. And there's a few other
mm,
moments in it where you think, "Ooh." I think it's largely because Rick Wright is he's literally using the keyboards that he used on those
mm,
records. So you hear a bit of
yeah.
Five Feet organ, or you hear the keyboard that he played on whatever Us
Mm,
and Them or something. And there's quite a few nice piano-y songs.
mm.
Are there any songs you want to highlight? I've written down four that I really enjoyed. I've got four tracks here. I've ticked all of them and gone, yeah, I really like that one. Which
Um, the first couple of tracks, Things Left Unsaid and It's What We Do, I think are
okay.
good. Got that Wish You Were Here vibe.
Hmm.
Um, I liked what's that one? On Needle Street. I mean, they're
Yeah,
all really short, aren't they? So they never have enough time to kind of
yeah.
run out of steam. So And
Interesting title for that one. I wonder what they were thinking of with that one because there's quite a lot of noodling on this record. I quite like the way that they've
yeah,
got this sort of sense of humour that they can call the
yeah,
song on Noodle Street. That's quite funny, I think.
yeah. And all those and yeah, the Nightlight and Alonzi and those sort of short tracks, I think are all good. Yeah. Then obviously
Yeah.
Stephen Hawking returns in Talking Hawk.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
is good. Yeah. Yeah, I had Alonzi as well. I had that one. I had Anicina. I ticked that one, enjoyed
yeah,
that
yeah.
one. TBS 14, no idea what that stands for, but I thought that was a lovely track. And the closing song, actually, or the instrumental Nirvana, that's Enervana, really
Mm,
heavy, great sort of, I think linking back to stuff they'd done in their very early career after Sid Barrett
mhm.
left. There's a song called the Nile Song. Have you heard that? It's on Relics. Um,
Yes, not for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, Floyd occasionally they sort of every now and then they would dally with this kind of sort of heavier version of themselves that I don't think was ever really going to take precedence because that
Mm,
wasn't really their thing. But Gilmour could definitely plug in and
mm,
turn his amp up and kind of rock out. And when that song comes in at the end, I kind of do think it's a shame that they couldn't have done that a bit more. I think the album
mm,
suffers from being a bit too floaty, maybe.
mm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, interestingly, um, This was sort of semi-produced by Youth,
Of course.
and David Gilmour's on the most recent Orb album.
Yes, he is.
Obviously,
Yes.
there's, we go back to that 90s stuff. There's obviously that connection, and surprise, surprise, they're all sort of working together now on this sort of ambient electro guitar stuff. The Orb stuff's really good actually with Dave Gilmour. Yeah.
Yeah. Floyd are the granddaddies really of that kind of music, aren't they? We said that already. I mean, you
Mm,
could say whatever, Pink Floyd, Tangerine Dream. There are a few classic 70s bands, although you could say that, Tangerine Dream were probably influenced by Pink Floyd in turn.
mm,
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by it. It is an album that you can listen to. I played it a few times just while I've been working.
yeah, background sort of music.
Yeah, which is fair enough. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but um, I don't think there was an attempt to really make a classic Pink Floyd album. I think it was
No.
probably just a case of trying to tie up some loose ends and
Mm,
bring the
mhm,
curtain down, I suppose, in a
mm,
way which is going to be respectful to Rick Wright. So we'll
mm,
finish with the remake of A Momentary Lapse, which I think came
mm,
out in 2019. I didn't know this album existed. I was in HMV a couple of years ago, just browsing in the sale, and I came across it on CD for a fiver. And
mhm,
if it had been even a tenner, I probably wouldn't have bought it because it was a fiver. I picked it up, took it home, listened to it, and I really, really liked it. They've stripped away a
mm,
lot of that sort of 80s stuff.
mm,
I think Nick Mason has played in his proper sort of acoustic drums. So they've stripped
mhm,
a lot of those, drum triggers
yeah.
away. They've
Mhm,
either turned Rick Wright up in the mix or they've had him go back in and add keyboard parts and they've taken
mm,
out some of the digital stuff. Gilmour has redone some of his lead vocals. I can definitely hear places where his singing is better. Um, and they've turned up some of the girl singers in the background, so you get more of a
mhm,
sort of gospely thing going on. I just thought it was a revelation. I
mm,
really, really enjoyed it, and it sent me back to the original album. I've not decided yet which one I prefer, but I really do like this 2019 mix.
mm.
What's your take on it?
Yeah, so it's good. It sounds more Pink Floydy. It's got that again with that addition of Rick Wright makes a
Mm.
big difference, I think, especially like the Farsi organ and all that kind of stuff. It's
Yes,
got
definitely.
yeah, better production. Remove the reverb from drums and other instruments, less reverb. So you got that
Well,
less 80s sound, so it's punchier.
yeah, well, I think it's new drum tracks. Like I said, I don't
Yeah.
think it's the same drumming. I think they've taken out the drumming and put Nick
Mm,
Mason in playing his drum because he didn't really play on the first album. He played a couple of things here and there, but
mm,
on the original version of the album, I don't think that's him playing
mm,
whatever on Dogs of War or One Slip. I think that's Carmine Apiece and Jim Keltner. So just really nice to hear the three of them. And yeah, I would imagine it made Roger Waters quite cross because again, it's that thing, he called the album a pretty fair forgery, and I think in a way the
mm.
remix album is even more of a
There's
forgery
more.
because at least
Yeah.
you could say in '87 this was Gilmour going right. Let's do a kind of sort of '80s contemporary
Yeah.
version, but the remake is actually him going actually let's just take out that '80s stuff now
Mm.
and make it sound more like 1978. But I don't know. So that does bring us up to speed. So
Yeah.
have you got anything to add?
No, I mean that's kind of the end of Pink Floyd, really, isn't it?
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting, when you make these decisions. I mean, we should sort of compare them to other bands who've done similar things, like Queen, for instance,
Hmm.
when they've come to a natural end, and then you kind of go, okay, let's carry on. And you think,
Hmm.
well, why would you do that? I
Hmm.
think with Pink Floyd, you can kind of see it. There's more of a reason for that. There's
Hmm.
definitely more of a Pink Floyd than Queen or Queen. I would argue. Um, but you kind of when you think bands are going to finish and they carry on, you kind of go, well, why do that?
Hmm. Well, I
I
guess
think, yeah.
what Floyd did that Queen didn't do was they did just carry on. What Queen did was
Mm,
they stopped for 20 years and
mm,
then just decided actually we want to make some more cash again and we want some more attention. So let's just get some bloke in
yeah. I
and
think if you don't have, I think
uh,
if you don't have the lead singer, it
mm,
makes more of an issue.
yeah,
Whereas obviously with Floyd, they've got Dave Gilmour is obviously sort of the co-lead singer. So uh, it's sort of a continuation. But if you don't have that, because the vocals are so um, such an
Yeah.
important part of music, isn't it? If you have someone singing different stuff in a different style, it never really sounds like the band, as it were.
Yeah, I mean that's what links it back to the Black Sabbath discussion that you
Yes. Yeah.
mentioned at the beginning, where it's such a world of difference between Ozzy and Ronnie James Dio. You think, is this the same band? But like you say, with Gilmour there from the old days, you know you've got this continuity. So yeah, I suppose we just really quickly mentioned that they did briefly
Mm.
get back
Live
together
8
again
was that?
for Live 8, yeah, which was actually
Yeah.
quite a moving experience. I thought that performance
Mm.
was actually very good, and I think it showed the world really that if they'd chosen to bury the hatchet, they could have gone back out again as a four
Mm.
piece. But
I thought I was a bit harsh on the bassist though.
true.
Yeah, like, "Sling your rock, I'm back."
Yeah, well, he's now in Nick Mason's Source Full of Secrets,
Right.
so he's done all right for himself. Who I'm going to see actually
Mm.
in June in Manchester, so I'm looking forward to that. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day saying I was 16 years old when I first saw Nick Mason, and I'm now 52, and I'm about to see him again. And he was an old man when I saw him the first time round.
Yes.
So I mean, it's just quite amazing how long these people manage to eke out their careers,
Mm.
but. Good stuff. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I
Mhm.
hope it sends some people back to those records because I think they are unfairly dismissed. They're not perfect. They're not like marvelous, wonderful, timeless, great albums. And I'm still not sure if they're proper Pink Floyd, but they're definitely not terrible and they've all got moments, I think. Good stuff. Well, thanks for joining me, Mark.
Good, it was enjoyable, yeah. Nice to
And
actually sort of revisit these and, give the last album a proper listen as well.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think of the three, that's the one that I'm most sort of pleased about. That I finally managed to sort of crack it and go, yeah, let's just give it a
Mm.
go and,
Mhm.
see what happens. Good stuff. Righto. Well, let us know what you think, folks. Pink Floyd post Waters. I know that there are some people out there who are going to just go, no, no. But the group does have its fans, I think. So there's a bit of a mixture of opinions. So it'll be interesting to see in the comments what people think. Anyway, so we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.